Hello everyone, you're watching Let's Talk About Prepping. I'm Tyler, your host, and in this video, we're going to watch me braid some paracord into a donut shape, and we're going to talk about 5G and the Internet of Things and why everybody's talking about them like it might be a threat. On this channel, we talk about preparing for emergencies or hard times, and sometimes that overlaps with conspiracy theories. And lately, people who are interested in conspiracy theories have been talking a lot about 5G and the Internet of Things. And at first, I wasn't going to pay too much attention to this and wait and see if it blew over, because it sort of sounded like the kind of thing that people like to get hyped up about when a new technological innovation comes around, and then which doesn't really turn into a big deal. But I decided to do a little bit of diligent looking into it, and it made me interested enough that I want to share some of my basic understanding of the concept. I don't really want to make any supposition here or tell you what I think about it, but I do want to tell you what people are saying and give a little bit of an intro to the concepts involved. First, a brief discussion about 5G. 5G is the term used to describe the next generation of mobile data technology. This is an upgrade on the 4G network, which is what we currently use to provide data services like the internet to things like cell phones and laptops, although it's important to remember that other things, like police cruisers and delivery trucks, use the 4G network for many of their devices. 4G service is transmitted by cell phone towers and devices using radio and microwaves and similar types of radiation, which propagates outwards in a wave pattern. This is occurring constantly around us and through us in a kind of electromagnetic soup, and it's something which the vast majority of us remain unaware of throughout our lives. At every second, we are all being constantly inundated by the cell phone signals of every single cell conversation and laptop transmission happening all around us within quite a large radius. And all of that information is all being picked up by every antenna in the area, which only pays attention to the information that it knows it wants. In the case of cell phone towers, it picks up the raw data of all of our transmissions and filters it and transmits it to the proper service providers to be transmitted throughout the network. 4G data networks can transmit an impressive amount of information wirelessly, but they do have their limitations. There are maximum amounts of information that can be transmitted in a certain bandwidth, and so in order to transmit more information, one is forced to go into a higher bandwidth part of the spectrum. But the problem with this is that these types of radiation do not propagate in the same way that radio waves do, for instance. Rather than spreading outwards evenly, sort of like the ripples in a pond that's been disturbed, 5G data transmissions are somewhat more directional in nature, which means that a simple antenna which is broadcasting a signal out in all directions won't do. 5G data transmissions are intended to be much more focused and intense in nature, and herein lies one of the things that causes a lot of concern for people. Many people are already quite concerned about the amount of electromagnetic radiation that we are exposing ourselves to. It's true that we are exposed to far larger amounts of electromagnetic radiation at all times than humans have ever been in all of our history, and I won't speculate on whether or not that will have any effect on us, but electromagnetic radiation does have an effect on any matter that it does interact with, although there are some types of radiation that do not interact with solid matter at all, and many which only interact with some types of solid matter. Take, for instance, X-rays, which only interact weakly with the soft tissues in your body, but strongly with some of the elements in your bones. To briefly summarize the concern that some people have with foreign 5G data networks, they are worried that the electromagnetic radiation in these high frequencies may be breaking down the DNA in our cells when it is induced into those DNA as though they are little antennas, and that the breakage of this DNA could cause the corruption of cells and thereby cancer. And aside from this, it is a definite truth that when electromagnetic radiation does interact with solid matter, it creates heat. And that the heat being produced by the interactions from our cell phone waves and our heads, for instance, could also be seen to have dangerous effects. Now, aside from the health hazards that people are seeing in having a lot of high frequency directional antennas put on nearly every rooftop in cities, because people are talking about intense infrastructure requirements for these kinds of networks, people are also worried about the oversight and tracking concerns that are being talked about openly when it comes to the uses inherent to this 5G network. Some individuals who support the implementation of the 5G network have pointed out its applications in use with the Internet of Things as one of its great supposed benefits. Many people will be unfamiliar with the Internet of Things, and actually its applications here are one of the things that caught my interest and which will be causing me to keep an eye on this. The Internet of Things is an internet separate from the common consumer internet, and which is used to track items and various other things of interest to various companies and entities. To compare the Internet of Things to our regular consumer internet, the regular internet isn't actually a place where our computer goes to find the information, as it is a logbook of where that information is kept on servers or home computers that are connected to the internet. The internet itself is really only a registry of the addresses of where that information is, which tells your device where to request that information from. The Internet of Things is similar because it is a logbook of different bits of information and the different times that that bit of information has been accessed. But instead of those bits of information being funny cat videos or the various other things that we put on the internet and which are most commonly searched for on the internet, the Internet of Things is actually a logbook which keeps track of a lot of unique serial numbers which have been assigned to objects in the real world or bits of data. And when those bits of data or objects have been changed or referred to by either a computer or something in the real world, the Internet of Things takes note of all the information that it can, where in the real world that information was accessed, who accessed it, and everything connected to it, including what was nearby at the same time if it's able to get that information. And this is where we step into the area of RFID. Radio frequency identification tags are very tiny microchips, so small that some can even be printed onto the thin plastic label on a soda bottle without being seen, which have no power source or real processing capability of their own, but which only hold their own single unique serial number. When radio frequency waves of the proper frequency interact with the very, very tiny antenna on this microchip, that microchip receives just enough energy to transmit its unique serial number back out at almost that same frequency. There are devices which sometimes have been put into the devices near the entryways at large box retail stores, which transmit the frequencies that activate these microchips and read the very weak signal that is returned from them, taking note of the serial numbers that were activated on microchips nearby, and sending that information to the Internet of Things, which collates it with past times that those serial numbers have been detected, and where and when, and in conjunction with what serial numbers were nearby at that time, and also maybe with the credit card number of the person who bought those items that those microchips are in. In this way, it is possible for a company to know who bought an item and where they have gone if they have passed near RFID scanners. And in this way, many people are concerned that private companies will be able to know exactly what you have with you at any given time and where you go, and use this information in conjunction with cell phone data and various other bits of information that they have about you to extremely accurately predict your actions at any given time or day, even up to months in the future, if you keep to your current patterns of behavior. The part where the 5G data network comes into play with the RFID and Internet of Things part of this picture is where it extends the range of RFID tracking capabilities. So far, RFID tracking capabilities have only been able to transmit and receive this kind of information from short distances. But supposedly, 5G data network is able to at least extend the range of the more sophisticated RFID devices, like smart pallets and various other inventory tracking devices, although perhaps not the extremely simple printable microchips that I spoke about. The concerns with the ability to track individual items by microchips implanted in them, even over good distances throughout a city, is one that could have very real concerns when you're talking about malicious players getting a hold of that information and using it to perform unfair market research or various other tracking exercises using information that individuals aren't aware is being provided to those people. And of course, many people have taken this a step further and suggested that conspiracies may be afoot to use this information to implement a sort of Big Brother-esque type of system where everybody is being tracked at all times by all the things that they use and by all the places that they go. Now, I don't want to say one way or the other what I think the health consequences of the 5G data network will be, or whether or not anyone wants to use it to keep track of us at all times. But I thought that the conversation was at least interesting enough to share the basics of it with all of you guys, in case you hadn't been chimed in on it yet. I hope that was interesting, and if you know anything that I didn't mention, or if you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you guys. And if you're here for the first time because of the subject matter and not necessarily because you're one of my subscribers, I'd love for you to stick around and check out some of the other topics we talk about. The 5G network may not be a threat to our everyday lives yet, but there are a lot of things, including this, that we might want to keep an eye on. And that's the kind of thing that we do in this community, as well as preparing ourselves to be ready for those situations if they do become a threat. Thanks for watching, guys, and stick tuned with Let's Talk About Prepping for future videos. Stay safe out there.